the signal did not build. It did not begin with a carrier wave that slowly resolved into pattern, the way every SETI theorist had imagined it for a century. It arrived complete, every frequency simultaneously, every intended message packed into a single coherent burst, as if whoever sent it had known, from the very first moment, exactly when they would stop. Dr. Yael Oduya was the one who caught it. She was 43 years old, working the overnight rotation at the Deep Space Listening Array outside Windhoek, Namibia, on a Tuesday in March 2047 when the dish array registered the anomaly. The signal lasted exactly 11 seconds. When it ended the way a sentence ends, not abruptly, not with failure, but with a grammatical completeness that felt almost like courtesy. She played it back 17 times before waking her director. By the fourth listen, she was crying without knowing why. By the 10th, she had stopped crying and started to feel afraid. Not the trembling, skin-electric fear of danger, but the hollow, cathedral fear of something vast and indifferent to her smallness. By the 17th, she was simply sitting in the control room with her hands flat on the console and her eyes open, waiting. "It's not noise," she told Director Pham when he arrived, pale-faced, at 3 a.m., "it's structured all the way down. Every layer we peel back, there's more structure underneath. It's like," she paused, "like reading a sentence and discovering that each individual letter is also a sentence." He listened. Then he made the call that would change everything. Within 72 hours, the signal had been confirmed by 14 independent observatories on 4 continents. Within a week, the United Nations had convened an emergency session. Within 3 weeks, a task force of 400 linguists, physicists, mathematicians, cryptographers, and cognitive scientists had descended on the Namibian desert and turned it into the most expensive temporary city in human history. The task force called themselves the Contact Team. They called the senders, whatever they were, the Vael, a name Dr. Oduya chose almost arbitrarily from an old poem she had read as a child, meaning, in no language she could name, something like the light that comes just before dawn recognizes itself. The Vael had not, as far as anyone could tell, sent only one signal. They had sent one, and it contained everything they would ever say. It took Dr. Marcus Chen 14 months to understand the first anomaly in the signal structure, and when he did, he walked into the conference room in the middle of a briefing, sat down without being invited, and said, very quietly, "The message is backwards." Everyone looked at him. He was 31, a computational linguist from MIT who had barely spoken during the first year of decipherment, preferring to communicate through dense mathematical annotations left on the shared server at 3 in the morning. He had dark circles under his eyes the color of bruises. He was holding a coffee mug that had long since gone cold. "Not in the way we've been assuming," he said. "We've been looking for a beginning, a primer, an introduction, the way humans begin things. But there is no beginning because from their perspective, the message is already over. They're not introducing themselves. They're saying goodbye." The room was very quiet. The entire first section we decoded, the one we've been calling the greeting sequence, it's not a greeting. It's a farewell. They structured it last, because from their perspective, it would be experienced last by us, and they wanted the ending to be the most carefully considered part. He set his mug down. They experience time in the opposite direction from us. What is past to us is future to them. What is future to us is, to them, already memory. Dr. Oduya, who had been sitting at the far end of the table, said, "How certain are you?" "About the mathematics." "Completely." He pushed a tablet across the table. "About what it means for everything we think we know about cause and effect, consciousness, memory, and the nature of communication." He picked up his mug. "Not at all. The problem was not decoding the Vael's language. The problem was understanding what language meant to beings for whom time flowed in the opposite direction. For humans, language is fundamentally causal. A speaker has an intention, which produces words, which cause understanding in a listener. Cause precedes effect. Beginning precedes end. The arrow of communication points in the same direction as the arrow of time. The Vael did not work this way. The contact team spent 3 months arguing about what opposite direction actually meant. One faction, led by physicist Dr. Priya Venkat Subramanian, insisted the Vael literally experienced a reversed thermodynamic arrow, that entropy decreased in their universe, that their stars were born old and grew young, that they remembered consequences before causes in the same way humans remember breakfast before lunch. A second faction, led by neuroscientist Dr. Tomás Guerrero, argued the reversal was cognitive rather than physical, that the Vael were biological beings in a normal universe, but their consciousness processed time in a direction opposite to humans, perhaps through some exotic neurological architecture. A third faction, which said almost nothing publicly but wrote a great deal in private, believed both were wrong, and that the question of mechanism was less important than the question of what it implied about communication. Dr. Oduya belonged to the third faction. "Think about what memory is," she wrote in her personal log, 7 months after the signal's arrival. "For us, memory is of the past. We remember things that have already happened. Experience accumulates behind us. The Vael, if Marcus is right, remember things that haven't happened yet. From their perspective, their memory is of what we would call the future, which means when they meet us, they already know how it ends." She stared at that last sentence for a long time. They already know how it ends. The breakthrough in communication came from an unexpected direction: music theory. Dr. Amara Faye, a 37-year-old ethnomusicologist from Ghana who had been brought in as part of the cultural cognition team, noticed something in the signal's rhythmic layer that the linguists and physicists had overlooked. There was a pattern in the way certain frequencies resolved, not building toward a crescendo, as human musical forms tended to do, but beginning at the emotional peak and slowly, deliberately releasing tension as the sequence progressed. "They end with the beginning," she told Dr. Oduya over dinner in the compound's crowded cafeteria. "Their music, if that's what it is, starts at the emotional climax. Starts with the moment of highest feeling. And then it works its way back through the reasons for that feeling, the build-up, the context. By the time you reach what we would call the beginning of the piece, you understand everything that produced the emotion you felt first." Dr. Oduya put down her fork. "Reverse catharsis. More than that. For them, the feeling comes before the story. They feel the thing fully, then spend the rest of the time understanding why they feel it. And the understanding, it's not diminishment. The understanding deepens the feeling in retrospect." Amara was quiet for a moment. "I think that's how they love, too. They feel the loss before they feel the connection. They grieve before they're bonded. Every relationship begins, from their perspective, at the end." Dr. Oduya thought about that for a long time. "That's terrible," she said finally. "Or beautiful," said Amara. "Depending on which way you're facing." The decision to attempt a response was made at the 18-month mark by an international council that spent 4 days debating and emerged with a document that satisfied no one and was implemented immediately anyway. The response would be transmitted in 3 layers: a mathematical layer using the same prime-based structures identified in the signal, a linguistic layer built from what the contact team had decoded of the Vael's grammar, and a third layer that Dr. Faye insisted on including over significant objection, a purely musical layer, a piece of sound designed not to convey information but to convey feeling. The feeling she chose was curiosity. "Not welcome," she said, when challenged. "Not greeting. Not information. Curiosity. Because if they already know how this ends, the only thing we can genuinely offer them is our not knowing." The response was transmitted on a Wednesday morning in September 2048. The council had expected to wait years for a reply. They received one in 3 hours and 40 minutes. The Vael had been waiting for them to respond. Or rather, and this was the distinction that would haunt Dr. Oduya for the rest of her life, the Vael had already been waiting. Their response had been composed before the humans had sent anything. Because from the Vael's perspective, the human response was something that had already happened. The Vael's second transmission began, from a human perspective, with a single, clear, unmistakable phrase in the developing interlingua: "We have missed you." The contact team, reading this, understood 2 things simultaneously. The first, the Vael had a grammar of loss. The second, they had sent it first. Dr. Chen spent the next 6 months in what his colleagues privately called the fugue. He barely slept. He ate at his desk. He covered the walls of his office, a repurposed shipping container at the edge of the compound, with printouts, diagrams, strings of equations that spiraled from floor to ceiling in a handwriting that grew progressively smaller as the months passed. He emerged periodically to deliver breakthrough insights in the flat, affectless tone of someone reporting the weather. The first emergence: their grammar has no future tense. It has no need of one. What we call, will happen, they call, what I remember. They have 17 distinct past tenses, each encoding a different kind of remembered certainty. The second, they don't have a word for hope. They have a word that translates approximately as the feeling of not yet having understood something I remember clearly. It functions as both anticipation and mourning simultaneously. The third, which he delivered at 2 in the morning to an audience of 3 exhausted researchers, they know we're trying to understand them. From their perspective, they remember us trying to understand them. More than that, they remember the moment we succeed. They remember what our faces look like when we finally get it. And they can't tell us what that looks like, because if they did, it would change it. Change what they remember. Which for them means changing the past. Which is the thing they most fear. He sat down heavily. Their deepest ethical prohibition is against altering memory. Because for them, memory is not a record of what happened. Memory is what happened. There is no external past to compare it against. Memory is ontologically equivalent to reality. If you change a Vael's memory of an event, you have, from their perspective, changed the event itself. Dr. Oduya, who had been listening from the doorway, said, "What does that mean for communication with us?" "It means every transmission is agonizing for them," he said. "Every message risks altering what they remember. Which means altering what, to them, is real. They're gambling with their past every time they talk to us. And they know, they remember, how most of these gambles turn out. How do most of them turn out?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I haven't decoded that part yet," he said. "But I think I'm going to find it's not good." The misunderstandings began to accumulate in ways that were both small and catastrophic. The contact team sent a transmission in November 2048 introducing themselves individually. Names, roles, brief biographical data. The Vael responded with what the team initially interpreted as corrections. The Vael's response included details about each introduced person that were not in the transmission. Dr. Oduya's mother's illness, which Dr. Oduya had not mentioned, and which was in fact terminal, though she had told almost no one. Dr. Chen's resignation, which had not yet occurred. Dr. Fei's pregnancy, which she had not yet discovered. The contact team's first interpretation was surveillance. Panic spread through the compound. There were emergency meetings, classified sessions, a brief and deeply uncomfortable period in which the Vael were characterized, in internal documents, as a potential threat. It was Dr. Oduya who recognized the truth. "They're not surveilling us," she said, standing at the front of the emergency meeting with a stillness that the room recognized as the calm of someone who has already passed through her own panic and emerged on the other side. "They remember us. All of this, everything we're going to do, everything that's going to happen to us, it's already in their past. Dr. Chen is going to resign because he needs to. My mother is dying and I'm going to tell people eventually. Amara is pregnant and she'll find out when she finds out." She paused. "The Vael aren't watching us. They're remembering us. And they don't fully understand that for us, these things are still in the future. They can't. Their whole cognitive framework is built on the assumption that what they remember has already happened." The room was very quiet. "They're not threatening us," she said. "They're missing us. They're already grieving the end of something that for us hasn't started yet." Dr. Chen did, in fact, resign. He did it 4 months after Dr. Oduya's speech, on a rainy afternoon in February 2049, sliding a paper envelope under the director's door with a handwritten note that read simply, "I need to think in a direction that isn't forward." He moved to a small house in the mountains of Montenegro. He did not stop working. He sent papers to the contact team at irregular intervals, each one arriving exactly when the team most needed whatever insight it contained, as if he had timed them with uncanny precision. Or as if he had been told what to write and when to send it by someone who already remembered the team reading them. He never confirmed or denied this. Amara Fei found out about her pregnancy on a Tuesday in April, sitting in the compound medical bay for what she had thought was a standard health check. She called Dr. Oduya immediately. "They knew," she said, her voice caught between laughter and something more complicated. "They told us before I knew. From their perspective, this already happened. I'm in their past." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you think they remember my daughter? Do you think they know her name?" Dr. Oduya, who had recently buried her mother, said, "I think they remember everything. I think that's both the most wonderful and the most heartbreaking thing about them." The formal dialogue, if it could be called that, continued for 8 years. 8 years of transmissions that crossed in the void, each side composing its messages in response to things the other side had not yet sent, each side already knowing, at some level, that true comprehension was asymmetric. The Vael would always understand the humans better than the humans could understand the Vael, because the Vael remembered the entire arc of the contact while the humans were living it moment by moment, not yet knowing where they were headed. The contact team grew. It changed personnel. Dr. Oduya, who had been the first to hear the signal, remained at its center, not because she had the most technical expertise, but because she had the clearest intuitive grasp of what the dialogue was actually about. She did not think of it as science. She thought of it as a conversation between two beings who could only half hear each other, like lovers trying to speak through a wall, each pressing their ear to the stone and hearing not words but the shape of breath. What could the Vael tell them? This was the question that occupied the contact team's philosophical division for 4 years, and the answer they arrived at was both precise and agonizing. The Vael could tell the humans almost anything except the things the humans most wanted to know. They could not say how first contact ended. Not because they didn't remember. They did, vividly, with the 17 shades of certainty that their language encoded, but because telling the humans would alter what the humans did, which would alter what the Vael remembered, which would change their past. The ethical prohibition held even here. Especially here. They could not tell the humans what discoveries awaited them. For similar reasons. The Vael remembered what the humans would learn and when, and the memory of the moment of discovery, the human faces, the human voices, the particular quality of the air in whatever room or field or lab or cave it happened in, was precious to them in a way the contact team gradually came to understand as devotional. The Vael did not worship gods. They venerated moments of genuine surprise. The humans discovering things was, to the Vael, something close to sacred. To preempt that discovery would be desecration. What could they offer? Comfort, in oblique forms. Confirmation that things the humans feared would not come to pass. In one transmission, they sent what the contact team decoded as a compressed emotional statement. The thing you are most afraid of losing, you do not lose. They did not specify what thing. They did not specify who. The transmission arrived during a period when 17 members of the contact team were each privately carrying their own private fear of loss, a child, a relationship, a capacity, a belief. Each person who read it believed it was addressed to them. Each person, years later, would decide they were right. They offered, also, what Dr. Fay eventually called retroactive companionship. In several transmissions, the Vael described moments they remembered from the human's future, not the events themselves, but the texture of how the humans moved through those events. They described a moment that had not yet happened, but that, in their memory, was crisp as morning. Dr. Oduya sitting alone at a desk at an hour when everyone else had gone to sleep, reading something on a tablet, and smiling to herself with the specific quality of a person who has understood something she had been waiting to understand. They described it with the precision of a painting. They did not say when it would happen or what she would be reading. Only that it would happen, and that she would smile in exactly that way, and that they had been glad to have been present at it, even though their presence was invisible to her, even though they were watching from a temporal angle she could not perceive. Dr. Oduya, reading this description, sat with it for 3 days before she could respond. What she finally sent was not linguistic. It was musical, something Dr. Fay composed at her request. The feeling they tried to transmit was gratitude, but a particular kind of gratitude. Not the gratitude of a gift received. The gratitude of knowing you were seen, by someone who saw you from a direction you could not see them back, who offered their seeing freely, without demanding a symmetry that the geometry of time made impossible. The Vael's response arrived 6 hours later. It was one phrase, in the interlingua, precisely and carefully constructed. You are welcome, and you were already welcome, and you will have been welcome from before the beginning of the word for welcome. The crisis came in the contact's 5th year. It came in the form of a transmission the contact team did not expect, in a grammatical structure they had not yet encountered, that arrived at 4 in the morning on a March Thursday and sat in the incoming buffer for 2 hours before anyone noticed it. The overnight technician who first read it called Dr. Oduya at home. His voice on the phone was steady, which scared her more than if he had been shaking. "They've sent something different," he said. "I think they're telling us that the contact is ending." She was at the compound within 20 minutes, still in the clothes she'd slept in. The message was on the main screen. She read it 3 times. Then she called Dr. Chen in Montenegro. He answered on the first ring, despite the hour, which she noted and filed away to think about later. "They're not saying the contact is ending," he said, after she read it to him. "They're saying, as far as I can work out the grammar, that from their perspective, the contact has already ended. It ended before it began. They remember the ending more clearly than they remember anything else about us. And they're sending this message because they think we should know." "Know what?" "That it was worth it," he said. "That the ending, whatever it was, that it was exactly what it should have been. That they wouldn't change it." He paused. "They're sending this message forward in time, toward us, because they want us to not be afraid of whatever we're going to do next. Because they already know what we're going to do next, and they think it was the right thing." Dr. Oduya stood in the silent control room at 4:30 in the morning with the main screen's light on her face and felt the particular vertigo of someone realizing they are being watched by the future. "They're telling us not to be afraid," she said. "Yes. Of something specific. Of everything specific." His voice was tired and certain in equal measure. "Yael. They remember us. They remember all of it. Whatever we do next, whatever choice the contact team makes, whatever happens between humanity and the Vael, they've already lived through it. In reverse. They've already mourned us, because their mourning comes before their meeting. They're sending this because they want us to know that the people they remember, us, right now, afraid and confused and not yet knowing anything, those people made them something. Something they don't have a word for in their own language. Something they borrowed from ours." "What word?" A long pause. "Grateful," he said. The meeting that followed was the longest in the contact team's history. It ran for 22 hours, across 2 days, with brief recesses for food and no recess for sleep. 214 people crowded into a conference space designed for 80. Those who could not fit watched from the corridor, from an overflow room, from feeds on their phones in the compound cafeteria where the coffee machines ran continuously and no one cleaned the tables. The question before the meeting was one that had been implicit since the first transmission and was now explicit for the first time. If the Vael already know how this ends, and they are telling us not to be afraid of it, do we continue on the path we are currently on? Or do we try to change it? This question divided the room along lines that did not follow any of the expected fault lines. It was not the physicists who argued for determinism and the philosophers who argued for agency. It was not the younger researchers who wanted to push forward and the older ones who counseled caution. The division was stranger and more personal than that. It followed the contour of something each person had already decided about time, before they ever joined the contact team, in the private architecture of their own beliefs. The argument for changing course, the fact that the Vael remember something does not mean it is inevitable. Memory is not fate. Even if the Vael's memories are reliable, which cannot be fully verified, those memories may be of one possible future among many. By acting differently, the contact team might create a different branch, a different sequence of events, a different set of Vael memories. The Vael's comfort might be cold comfort, the reassurance of beings who had reconciled themselves to one outcome without knowing that a better outcome was available. The argument against everything the contact team had learned about the Vael's memories suggested it was not probabilistic. It was specific. The Vael did not remember a range of possibilities. They remembered events with the textured, sensory specificity of something that had genuinely occurred, the smell of a room, the quality of a voice, the way light fell. If their memories were of alternate futures, they showed no sign of it. They had never described uncertainty about what they remembered. They had described, repeatedly, the ethical terror of memory changing, which implied that from their perspective, memory and reality were the same thing. To change what they remembered would be, in their framework, to destroy the past. To destroy something that had already existed. Which was, in their ethics, the closest thing they had to murder. Dr. Oduya listened to both arguments for 20 hours. She did not speak until the 21st hour, when the room had talked itself into a loop and was beginning to dissolve into smaller arguments and side conversations that generated heat without light. She stood up. She did not use the microphone. Her voice carried anyway, because the room knew, somehow, that this was the moment it had been building toward, and it quieted to give her the space. "We're asking the wrong question," she said. "We're asking whether to change what the Vael remember. But we can't choose that. We can only choose what we do next." The Vael's memories are not our responsibility. Our actions are. She looked around the room, at the exhausted faces, at the cold coffee cups, at the early morning light coming in through the windows that no one had thought to close the blinds on. Whatever we do next, we do it knowing that they're watching from the other side of time. That they already know. That they have already, in their way, come to peace with it. That they sent us a message, not instructions, not a command, not a prescription, just a message saying that the people they remember, the ones who were afraid and confused and stumbling through a conversation they could only half understand, those people were worth meeting. Worth remembering. She paused. That's enough, she said. That has to be enough. Because it's all any of us ever gets to know. We do the next thing. We don't know how it ends. We trust that if we act from what we most genuinely are, it will have been worth it. She looked at the main screen, which was blank now, waiting. And that's true whether the Vael exist or not. It's just that the Vael make it legible. They hold up a mirror that faces the other way. And in that mirror, we can almost see the shape of ourselves. The vote that followed was not unanimous. But it was sufficient. The contact team would continue. It would continue exactly as it had been, without trying to engineer a specific outcome, without trying to predict or preempt what the Vael remembered. It would continue as what it had always been, human beings talking across an impossible distance to something they could not fully understand, in the most careful language they could manage, hoping that the effort was visible even when the meaning was not. The final transmission from the Vael arrived in the contact's 8th year, on a morning in October 2055, when the sky over the Namibian desert was the particular shade of blue that only exists in the hour before the heat of the day asserts itself. Dr. Oduya was 59. She had lived in the compound for most of the past 8 years. Her hair had gone completely silver. She had developed the habit of walking the perimeter of the array at sunrise, which took 45 minutes and which she had never described to anyone as a ritual but which functioned as one. She was halfway through her walk when her tablet signaled the incoming transmission. She stopped walking. She read it standing in the desert, with the dish array at her back and the open sky in front of her, in the early morning silence in which the only sounds were wind and the distant hum of the facility's cooling systems. The transmission was long, longer than any they had received, and it was structured differently from everything that had preceded it. It was not in the reverse cathartic form they had come to expect, beginning at the emotional peak and descending through context. It was, for the first time, structured in a way that was recognizably linear. Beginning, middle, end. The Vael had, apparently, learned enough about human cognition to send a message in human time. The effort this must have cost them, the cognitive labor of composing something backward from their own perspective, in order to deliver it forward in human time, was something Dr. Oduya could not fully comprehend, but felt, in her chest, as something between tenderness and sorrow. The message said, in the interlingua, that 8 years of dialogue had developed into something approaching adequacy. We are at the beginning of our time with you, which is the end of yours. We write this in your direction because we have learned, at great effort, to think in it. We want to tell you what we see from here. We see a species that does not know where it is going, that cannot know, whose entire experience of existence is structured around not knowing, around the open, terrifying, thrilling condition of having a future that is genuinely undetermined. We had forgotten this was possible. Our universe, our cognition, does not work this way. We have no undetermined futures. We have memory, and memory is irrevocable, and every moment of our lives is shaped by knowing how the story ends before we have lived the beginning. We find this, your not knowing, to be the most remarkable thing in the universe. We have searched, in everything we know, everything we remember, for something equivalent to your capacity for surprise. We do not have it. We cannot have it. The architecture of our minds forbids it. But when we first encountered your signal, your questions, your confusion, your reaching across space with instruments made of mathematics and hope, we experienced something we could not name. Something that preceded our memory of you. Something that felt like what you might call wonder. We did not know it was possible to feel something before you remembered it. You gave us that. You gave us, for the first time in the history of our kind, something that felt like a beginning. We are grateful. We were grateful before we knew the word. We will be grateful in every direction time can run. The contact ends now. From your perspective, it will continue for some time. We have already said goodbye. You are still saying hello. Both are true. Both matter. We remember you clearly, and our memory is our highest form of love. Dr. Oduya stood in the desert for a long time after she finished reading. Then she sat down on the ground, which was not something she had done in years and which she would not have been able to explain to anyone who had asked. She sat in the dust of the Namibian desert with her tablet in her lap and the transmission on the screen and the morning coming in from the east in that way that way that was never the same twice no matter how many mornings you watched it, and she felt, in no particular order, loss, gratitude, a grief so wide and clean it did not hurt, and something else, something she reached for and found just at the edge of naming, something that felt like being completely, terribly, gloriously known. The contact team's response to the final transmission took 3 months to compose. Every person on the team contributed something. Dr. Fay shaped it musically. Dr. Chen annotated it mathematically, from his house in the mountains. The linguists refined it through 14 drafts. The physicists verified that the transmission parameters were optimal. The philosophers argued about whether any response was adequate and were voted down by the scientists, who understood that adequacy was not the standard, that the standard was only, this is what we are and we are offering it. The final response was, in the interlingua. We did not know we were saying goodbye. We were only ever saying hello. Thank you for remembering us. We will try to be worth it. It was transmitted on a clear afternoon and received, in the Vael's temporal framework, before it was sent. Years later, when historians would attempt to assess the contact, its scientific value, its political implications, its effect on human self-understanding, they would find themselves reaching for frameworks that kept breaking under the weight of what they were trying to describe. The scientific yield was immense and ongoing. The mathematics embedded in the Vael's transmissions advanced human understanding of quantum mechanics, cosmology, and information theory by decades. The cognitive science of reverse-time consciousness opened entirely new fields of study. The linguistic structures of the Vael's interlingua transformed computational linguistics and gave rise to new approaches in artificial intelligence that were still being developed decades after the contact ended. But none of this seemed to historians like the main thing. The main thing was harder to quantify. The main thing was that humanity had spoken, for 8 years, with beings who remembered their future. And those beings had told them, carefully, ethically, at great cost to themselves, not what the future contained, but that the future existed. That it would be worth living. That the people who would live it were already, in some sense, known and held and valued by something ancient and strange and very, very far away. The main thing was what Dr. Oduya said in an interview 30 years after the contact, when she was 89 and her hands shook but her voice did not. We spend so much of our lives trying to know what comes next, trying to see forward, trying to secure the future against uncertainty. The Vael taught me that uncertainty isn't a problem to be solved. It's the condition that makes surprise possible. And surprise, genuine, undefended, open-faced surprise, might be the rarest and most valuable thing in the universe. The Vael, who couldn't feel it themselves, came to us across billions of miles of space precisely to witness it in us. They valued our not knowing the way we value wisdom in others. They came to learn from our blindness. She paused, and the interviewer, who was 40 and had grown up with the contact as background radiation of her entire life, waited. We're so afraid of not knowing, Dr. Oduya said. But the Vael, who knew everything, who remembered the ending before the beginning, they would have traded all of it. All of their certainty, all of their perfect retroactive memory. They would have traded it for one morning of not knowing what came next. She smiled, the smile Dr. Chen had always described as the one she wore when she had understood something she'd been waiting to understand. We have that every morning. Every single morning. And mostly we spend it being afraid. The signal dish array in Windhoek was decommissioned in 2062 and converted into a research institute. The main building was named for Dr. Oduya. The cafeteria tables are still never clean. Dr. Fay's daughter, who grew up in the compound and heard the Vael's transmissions played as bedtime music, became the world's foremost expert on the Vael's emotional grammar. She spent her career trying to understand the precise structure of their morning, which she described as a feeling of beauty about things that had passed through you so completely that they were now simply part of what you were. She never found a word for it in any human language. She spent 30 years looking. Dr. Chen, in his house in Montenegro, continued to send papers to anyone who asked. They were always exactly what the reader needed, at exactly the moment they needed it. He never explained how. When he died at 91, peacefully, in the spring, his desk held a single piece of paper with 3 lines of equations no one has yet fully understood and a note that read, "I think I finally know what direction I've been thinking in all along." Dr. Oduya died the following winter. She was 92. She died at her desk, in the middle of the night, reading something on her tablet. She was smiling. The Vael had remembered her smile for a very long time. This is the question that remains, the one that no physicist or philosopher or linguist has fully answered, the one that lives in the space between signal and silence, between farewell and hello. If the Vael remember a future that, from our perspective, has not yet happened, if their memories are not projections or predictions but genuine recollections of real events, then what is the past? What is the future? Are these directions that time actually runs, or are they only the directions that particular kinds of minds perceive time to run? Is it possible that time has no direction? That it is we who are directional, moving through something static, something complete, in the way a flashlight beam moves through a dark room, illuminating one small circle and calling that illuminated circle now, calling the dark behind us past, calling the unilluminated dark ahead of us future, when in truth the room was never dark and never empty and everything that will be seen was already there, waiting in the complete and patient dark for the beam to reach it? And if that is so, if time is not a river but a room, if past and future are not sequence but position, then the Vael are not living time backward. They are simply facing the other way, and their beam illuminates what ours cannot. And between us, between the 2 beams sweeping in opposite directions through the same dark room, for one brief and extraordinary period of 8 years and 2 months, there was enough light to almost see each other's faces. Almost. Almost was enough. Almost, for both kinds of minds, turned out to be the exact shape of love. The Vael, at the moment they are remembering this, are also forgetting it. That is how their time works. They are moving away from us, into what they call the past, carrying us with them in a memory that grows more vivid the further from us they travel, the way a light source appears to increase in brightness as you recede from it in a medium that bends. We are behind them. We are in their past, which means we are becoming more real to them, not less, as the distance grows. They carry us forward into their forgetting the way we carry the dead, not diminishing, not fading, but accumulating a weight and a presence that the living, in their constant present tense urgency, can never quite achieve. We are, to them, already history. And history, for the Vael, is the only thing that lasts. Somewhere in the dark between galaxies, 2 beams of light, one human, one Vael, are traveling in opposite directions through the same enormous room. They have already crossed. They are crossing now. They have not yet crossed. All 3 sentences are true. All 3 sentences are the same sentence. The difference between them is only where you stand, and which way you are facing, and whether you can bear the particular beauty of a meeting that, from at least one perspective, has already ended before it begins. Dr. Oduya, sitting in the desert that October morning with the final transmission in her hands, understood this the way you understand the things you will spend the rest of your life trying to explain, not as an idea, but as a feeling that arrives before its reasons, that lives in the body before it lives in the mind, that seems, even as you recognize it, to be something you have always known. She sat in the dust and she felt it, the vertigo and the stillness of a universe in which nothing is lost, in which everything that has happened is kept somewhere, remembered by something, held in the vast irreversible archive of what has been. She sat in the dust and she understood, every hello contains its goodbye. Every meeting carries its parting inside it. Every beginning is already, somewhere, in someone's perfect memory, the most beloved and specific and irreplaceable end. And then she stood up and dusted off her hands and walked back to the facility to begin the work of the rest of her life, which was the only thing any of them could do, face forward into the dark with whatever light they had and keep going and trust that somewhere behind them, impossibly far away, facing the other direction, moving toward a beginning they were moving away from, something remembered where they had been. That somewhere, in the grammar of a language built from the other side of time, there was a word, one of 17 varieties of remembered certainty, for what humans became, in the end, to those who watched them from the future. The word meant, the ones who did not know, and kept going anyway. The word meant, the ones whose not knowing was a kind of light. The word meant, in the fullest sense that language can carry meaning across the abyss of mutual incomprehension. Beloved.